Hi everyone, I'm Bill Fishbein from the Coffee Trust, and we're broadcasting here from the Trifecta Coffee Company in Albuquerque, New Mexico. The Coffee Trust is a nonprofit that works with fair trade organic coffee producers in San Gaspar Chahul in El Quiché, Guatemala. It's National Coffee Day on Sunday, September 29th, and I'm here with Dean Cycon of Dean's Beans from Orange, Mass. Dean and I go way back. We go way back, and I'm proud to call Dean my friend and my mentor for that matter, because when I dipped my toe in development at Origin some 30-odd years ago, it was Dean who put me on the right course. A course, by the way, that has guided me ever since. There's actually no telling where I might have ended up were it not for Dean. I could have been a contender. Anyway, Dean, thank you so much, and thank you for joining us on National Coffee Day. As I recall, Dean, you grew up backstage on Broadway watching Richard Kiley play Don Quixote in Man of La Mancha. Was it Richard Kiley who was playing it back then?
Yeah, actually, I was in high school, and I was going to high school during the day and working backstage at night, and that's how I paid for college. I earned my keep. But more significantly, the theme of the impossible dream from the Man of La Mancha became my mantra. It actually kind of helped form the person I am.
One might say you've been pursuing that impossible dream for a lifetime.
Well, I've been tilting at windmills long enough, that's for sure. But no, absolutely, I believe in it.
Did you ever imagine that dream would get you to the coffee lands?
No, I didn't even know anything about coffee until that fateful day in 1988 or 1987 when I was giving a lecture at the University of Rhode Island on deforestation in Brazil. And after I was done with the lecture, because my background at the time was an environmental and indigenous rights lawyer, after the talk, this crazy man comes out of the audience, a teacher at the University of Rhode Island named David Abaddon, and he says, "Hey, I've got a friend. He has a coffee shop in Providence, Rhode Island, and he buys coffee from Brazil, right where you're talking about. He knows the farmers are poor and he really wants to help them, but there's just not a lot of ways to do it. Will you meet him and talk to him?" And I said, absolutely.
Well, thank you for doing that, Dean, because it's what got us started.
What got us started. And that was my introduction to coffee.
Wow. That's amazing.
If he had said, "Hey, I've got a friend who makes shoes in Brazil," I'd be Tom's.
Well, I've had my own interesting background with the impossible dream myself, and I'll share that with you one day, but not today.
Let's not talk about your dating life, okay? That's not on this show.
Okay. Well, let me get started, and so let me start by asking you. You've been doing this kind of work for over 30 years. And you've had a number of remarkable achievements. Can you pick one that you're most proud of?
Well, there's achievements in the field, and then there's sort of process achievements. So they're two separate worlds. So I'd first like to talk about the big process achievements. I am really, really proud and honored to have worked with you all these years, on and off in our own worlds, to move the coffee industry. When we first started, I remember so well setting up those first booths at the SCAA in the late 80s, people walking by and saying, "Give money to help coffee farmers? Why? We already pay them for the coffee." That was the extent of awareness of social justice, of environmental, of economic justice in the coffee industry back then. And look how far the needle has shifted as a result, in large part, of our efforts. And I say that without fear of contradiction. I'm really, really proud of it. I remember one time I visited Starbucks mothership in Seattle with a friend. We were trying to get them to give us some money for the first work with landmine victims. And as we walked out, the woman in charge of sort of giving at Starbucks turned to Michael, the guy I was with. I was halfway down the block already, and she said, Dean's made Starbucks a better company. And Michael told me that, and I thought, wow, okay, we're moving the needle. So that's the industry side, and I'm really proud of that. On the farmer side, my biggest accomplishment is the feeling that I've figured out a method that, in working with farmers, that's not charitable, it's not hierarchical, it's really about empowering farmers to make their own decisions on their developmental needs, which uh, influences how they then act in the coffee world with potential buyers. And it's all about people feeling good about themselves, empowered about themselves, and having a better sense of self-esteem through our work, so that they no longer feel like victims and can step up to the plate and say, hey, this is our life. We want a say in this, whether it's pricing or development. And I've seen the change. So many farmers we've worked with over the years, where they started out so humble and so self-effacing and so afraid to say something to the buyer. And now they're like demanding, this is what we want, this is what we believe, this is what we deserve. So yeah, some great programs on the ground for this and that and the other thing. The development work has been exquisite and fun for me. But it's really that dynamic of change in the people themselves in the coffee villages that, to me, has the most meaning.
Well, that's really great to hear.
Great to be able to say.
Well, yeah, and I know there's an awful lot behind that as well. And now, on the other side of that, what about the disappointments? Some dreams that you may have had that just remain unfulfilled.
Well, I was almost chosen to be on Dancing with the Stars. And at the last minute, I didn't make it. And then they invited Sean Spicer, and I thought, I'll never be on that show. I have no desire to be on that show. Okay, that's a small disappointment. In the real world of disappointment, to be honest with you, the major disappointment I have is that after 30 years of this, even though so many people have been impacted, the larger coffee industry is still so resistant to participating in meaningful change to better coffee farmers' lives. And I can't think of a better or worse example than what's going on with coffee prices right now, where, for years we've been talking about, we got to get away from the C price. It has no meaning to the farmer's life. It's about speculation. It's not about cost benefit to the farmers or profit, reasonable profit, administrative expenses, none of the stuff. The way we price coffee and the way the farmers price coffee is so different because the farmers have no say in the matter, really. So, we've been working on coffee pricing all these years, and for there to be so many headlines still, coffee companies meet and make a pact that they're going to do something about farmer pricing. Really? This is where we were 20 years ago with the exact same problems. Hundreds of thousands of people coming up to the southern border running away from low coffee prices. Well, what's changed? Nothing's changed. The coffee industry still relies on this antiquated, greedy pricing mechanism. And until that's changed, nothing changes fundamentally at the coffee level. And so I long for the day that Coffee Trust, Coffee Kids, Dean's Beans development model is out of date because we don't need it anymore, because farmers are getting paid what they deserve and they can afford to make their own developmental choices and pay for their own schools. So that's my disappointment, that the needle on that really hasn't moved that much, in the bigger world. And unfortunately, so many of the younger coffee roasters coming up, so many really care. I get flooded by people at SCA like, wow, we really want to integrate this kind of social change into our business model. But I also meet an awful lot more who say, quality is the thing. If you give them quality coffee, then of course they'll get more money. And it's just like, man, you're taking us back to the Ronald Reagan years, and it didn't work then and it's not working now. But it sure gets you off the hook if you don't want to pay more money for coffee. So that's a big disappointment to me.
Yeah, and quite honestly, a lot of them are willing to pay more for their coffee, but they don't realize that that one dimension is just not going to cut it. And when you buy 8 or 10 or even 20 bags of coffee at a very high price, it really doesn't move the needle at all for the producer.
Right, and on the other side, for somebody to pay $2 more for a pound of coffee, that's great. But then they charge $10 more to the customer. So they're making more money. And it's like, is that really about change, or is that about somebody making more money? I remember
awesome.
Starbucks first packaged, after coffee kids got started in the late 80s. I remember Starbucks packaged 2 pounds of coffee together and say, if you buy these 2 pounds of coffee, we will give $1 to whatever program they had. But Consumer Reports revealed that if you bought the 2 bags of coffee, you actually paid $1.25 more than you would have if you just bought the individual bags. So Starbucks was still making an extra 25 cents. There you go.
Yeah. Well, we could lament those issues for a long time, but there are
Isn't
worse.
that what we're supposed to be doing?
Well, I'll just to lament a little further. What do you think the three, or pick one, don't have to pick three, most threatening issues facing the coffee producers over the next generation?
That's easy. I'll give you 3, and they're all related. The first one is climate change. Plain and simple, climate change is happening faster than most people's ability to adjust for it. So there's a lot of dry land coffee farming around the world. Ethiopia is a great example of it. But to take the techniques and the culture of coffee farming from the dry lands of Ethiopia into Latin America, very, very, very difficult. The soil has to adjust, the plants have to adjust, the farmers have to adjust. We see it every single visit we make to origin. I don't know why people don't get it. Climate change is not a theory. When you're on the ground in the coffee villages and the rains have changed so that the flowers don't bloom when they're supposed to, and then the dry time comes so the flowers fall off before the berry develops, or you see a field destroyed by rust, which is a fungus in the soil. Why? Because the environment has changed, so the fungus blooms and the plants aren't strong enough to resist it. I mean, it's so clear. The farmers know it, we know it, but it's very hard to get people to wrap their heads around that this cup of coffee, is not really going to be supporting people for the rest of their lives. Climate change is major. That's one. The second thing is, as I said earlier, this pricing thing. You would think with climate change, when Colombia lost 30% of its crop for a couple of years, you would think that the price of coffee would go up, supply and demand. But it never did, because supply and demand doesn't work in the coffee world. It's about whatever the speculators agree to in the Board of Trade in London and New York. So price. Coffee farmers today, I don't know what it was today, but it was like 96 cents last week. Coffee farmers can't make a living. And if every time they sell a pound of coffee, they're getting back less than they invested in it, you can't live like that. No business can. So we're starting to see a lot of price refugees. So, I broke this almost a year ago to Vice magazine, and they put it on air on social media, that the largest group of people trying to cross the southern border in America are from Guatemala, of the Triangle countries. Of the people in Guatemala, the largest group of Guatemalans are from Huehuetenango. The people in Huehuetenango are not running away from drugs. They're not running away from gang violence. They're running away from not making enough money on their coffee to support their families. So they're heading north. So people have to understand that the ramification of coffee companies paying such a low price for coffee is that you're driving people not only into poverty, but off their land, against our border. And how much better would it be to take $3 billion and not build the wall, but put it into better pricing mechanisms, something to do with keeping farmers on their land? That's 2. The third one is the next generation issue, for 2 reasons. One, young people see no future in coffee because they look at their parents and they say, geez, what the hell are we going to do? Our parents can't feed us. They can't keep the kids in school. We got to get out of here. We got to get a job. We got to send money back to our parents so that they can stay afloat. That's traditional, migration patterns. And that's really a big issue in coffee. Combine that with the fact that, Jose has an acre of land or 2 acres of land. He has 4 kids. When they grow up, 2 of them are going to stay on the land, if not 4. That means that acre has to be divided into 2. And now it has to support 2 families. And I have heard over and over again from farmers that there's no way in the future that lands can be sustainable by coffee families when there's more families than land. This is an issue I saw over and over again in the 1970s and 80s working on Indian reservations. When families of Native Americans grew and they've got a single lot of land, then multi-generations have to make a living off that land. They can't do it. So the three issues are climate, price, and intergenerational equity. And that's a profound set of problems.
Well, that's sobering. Sobering. Dean, I see the gray hair on your head. I got a few myself, but the enthusiasm that comes across is like you're a teenager. Yeah. And so I wonder, what do you still want to accomplish?
Oh, well, I have a lot to accomplish outside the coffee world. That's why at 66 I'm thinking of retiring. Not because I don't love what I do. I love this with a passion. Especially the development work. It's my life. But there's so many other things I want to do. I was in fisheries before I was in coffee. I would like to go back and take our people-centered development, direct people-centered development model and apply it to fisheries, indigenous fisheries around the world. So that's one. But I have one more goal in the coffee world. That is, I want to be the first progressive founder not to sell out to a multinational corporation at the end of my tenure. So, whether it's Ben & Jerry's, Tom's of Maine, Honest Tea, all of them, all those founders who said, oh, we're environmental, we're organic, we're progressive, at the end of the day, they took the check and walked. So I want to be the first guy not to do that. And in the coffee industry, we're seeing it too. Intelligentsia, for example, BAM, sold to the European conglomerate. Gloria Jean, way back when, so many coffee companies. Pete's, so many coffee companies started by people with great intentions and good hearts, ultimately disappear into the oosphere of international corporate money. So I want to be the first guy not to do that. And I'm working on the plan. Stay tuned. Okay.
All right. Well, I think we'll all be disappointed when you leave the coffee industry, but
I'll still drink coffee.
There you go. So before we go, Dean, the annual conference next year is going to take place in Portland, Oregon, and I'm wondering if you and I both attend, and we could get in the same key. At the open mic night, what do you say we both sing The Impossible Dream?
Oh, I'll tell you what. I'll be Sancho Panza because I'm a little chubbier than you are. Bill, you're on.
Okay. It's a deal. All right.
But we got to get 50 people to say we'll put down $100 each if these guys get up there and sing.
Okay, all right, let's work on that.
Going to the Coffee Trust. We'll make it a fundraiser.
Okay, that's great. All right, Dino. Well, it's absolutely great to talk to you. It's great to hear your comments on the coffee trade. This is just 4 questions. Okay, we could have 40 questions for Dean, and every one would be answered with the same articulate way that Dean just did it. And for those of you who have been listening, it's quite a perspective on the coffee trade and on life. If you would like to join Dean in support of the Coffee Trust, please go to www.thecoffeetrust.org. We accept any donation, the smallest donation we appreciate deeply. So once again, thank you, Dean, and I look forward to seeing you soon, before Portland, I hope.
I'll start practicing my vocal cords.
Okay, all right.
Thanks, Bill. Care. Always a pleasure. It's great to know that your spirit and your heart are still in the coffee industry.
Working on it. We'll see you in Portland. Okay, take care, Dino.